Welcome to the Emotional Eating Unwrapped podcast. I'm your host, Alana Kessler, an emotional eating and weight loss coach for women looking to fall in love with eating, create healthy attachments with food, and lose weight sustainably. Hello, and welcome to another new episode of Emotional Eating Unwrapped. I'm your host, Alana Kessler, and today we're going to be having an honest conversation about something that on the outset might not seem like a big deal on the surface, but actually touches a lot of different layers underneath. We're going to be talking today about eating alone. And this is a really, I think, potent and timely conversation because I've seen a lot of people eat alone. I personally am a huge fan of solo eating, but I think it's really important that especially for the women that listen to this podcast and for the women I work with, and even, as somebody who did struggle with my relationship to food and eating, it's really important to talk about the different angles of solo eating and not just view it from the glamorized way that it is on Instagram now, not like the main character energy when you're sitting in a cafe in New York City or Paris, or, sipping your coffee by yourself with your food by yourself, right? Like there's this image that we have of solo eating that is put out there in the zeitgeist. But today we're going to go a little bit deeper into what it actually feels like to sit at a table alone with your food, especially when you've been someone who's spent, months, years, decades using food as comfort, as escape, or as a secret. Because here's the truth about this. Solo dining it's not just about the independence flag being waved, right? It's not just about that. It's because it's not just about other people seeing you being this independent woman eating by herself. It's about whether you feel safe being seen. So if you've ever felt, embarrassed to eat alone in public, or maybe even ashamed of how you eat in private, this is going to be the episode that you want to listen to, because we're going to talk about solo eating, like I said, not just as an image, but what it really means to eat alone. Okay. And there are two different angles to this. All right. So let's dive in. As I said before, we live in a time right now where solo dieting is suddenly trendy. And truthfully, I don't really think it's suddenly trendy, because I did eat by myself a lot, especially when I was single, especially when I lived in New York City. I went on vacation a lot by myself. So I'd often be sitting at a bar, at a bar top, at a hotel by myself, eating alone. And, there were when I think back now, there were a lot of layered feelings going on inside of me. And I'm excited to dive into that, because what I'm seeing now in social media are TikToks of women taking themselves out to dinner, great solo vacations, like I said, movie nights for one. But the thing is the way that it's being presented is with captions that say things like romanticize your life, be your own soulmate, which is totally great. Like I actually really was empowered in that way as well. When I would eat by myself, there were times where I felt that energy and that message as authentic to me. And I think that it is a really important thing. It's something that I teach every woman that I work with, to build the skill of being by yourself, becoming your own best friend, becoming your own soulmate. But I don't think that it happens immediately. I don't think that, if you were to just if you were to just decide, if you're somebody who does struggle with emotional eating or body shame, I think if you were to just decide to do it and hope and think that your experience is going to be like the one you see on social media, I think that without having some, pre processing and, having, doing some introspection and hearing some different perspective of experience you might have, I think you might notice that when you do get out there into the wild, having your solo dinner, it's not going to always feel as picture perfect as the internet makes it look. Because for some, eating alone in public does feel like freedom. But for others, and I can say this as truth because I've heard many women that I've worked with say this, for others, it feels like a spotlight, right? You sit down, suddenly you are hyper aware of everything, right? What you ordered, how fast you're eating, what your body looks like as you bring the fork to your mouth. You might even think that everyone's watching you, even if they're not watching you. You might think you have to prove something. You might be having weird conversations in your head, or not necessarily weird, but, kind of confusing, or conversations in your head that maybe are just repetitive voices that are from the past or other people in your life. And there just might be a lot going on internally while you're sitting there eating by yourself, right? You might be worrying if you're eating the right way. You might be worrying about whether you belong at this table, right? It becomes this invisible performance. And there's this push-pull that happens where, on one hand, you want to be seen as empowered. But on the other hand, you feel like you're on trial for simply feeding yourself. And that is the contrast that we're talking about. The public message of confidence and the private reality of discomfort. And this contrast, when it's unconscious, and so this is what we're doing now, we're bringing consciousness to this contrast, because the only way that we can heal, the only way that we can evolve, the only way that we can become the version of ourselves that we see on the internet is to truly do the authentic work of, taking off the, turning on the light, right? Taking off the roof of whatever's underneath. And that's what we're doing. So we have to address this contrast, because without it, this is how shame can start to sneak in. So let's now talk about the other side, right? We just talked about what the internet shows and what the messaging is about, going out and eating by yourself and how empowering that is. But let's flip the lens, because not everybody who eats alone is doing it by choice. So the version that we just talked about is you're choosing to go out and eat by yourself. And just to recap, the intention is that it's empowered, but there is a contrast where maybe there's some other things going on, other invisible conversations that are going on in your head. But then the other kind of solo dining is not doing it by choice from this place, but it's the kind of solo eating that happens in secrecy. Okay, this is also solo eating, right? Secret eating, the one where you're hiding in the kitchen with the fridge door still open, standing up, or eating in your car, going to 7-Eleven, getting a whole thing of donuts, eating in your car, windows fogged, right, or at night in the dark, wherever, because somehow when it's dark or when it's secret or hiding, it feels like it's less real that this is happening. So this type of solo dining, it's not mindful solo dining. right? This is emotional eating in isolation. However, you're still solo. And the reason that this is so particularly painful and not empowering is because this isn't about the food. It's about loneliness. It's about secrecy. It's about panic, right? It's about shame. That's basically saying, I don't want anyone to see me like this. And yet, this type of solo dining and solo eating is a pattern, right? It becomes a pattern. And it's a pattern that we've talked about often. We just haven't connected it to this concept of eating alone, which is why we're really raising the curtains on this. And it becomes a pattern because you're still performing, right? You restrict all day to look in control, and you want others to feel like they feel like you're in control. But then when you're finally by yourself, the floodgates open. Because when you're alone, you give yourself permission to be human, right? You give yourself permission to take off the mask, stop the performance. But what happens is it takes so much emotional energy to carry on the performance that it's not a release and a relief that's nurturing. Instead, it becomes like a collapse. I remember what it felt like to be stuck in the cycle of emotional eating. I tried every diet out there, counting, tracking, restricting, but nothing ever worked. Food controlled my life, my thoughts, and I constantly felt guilty after eating. But once I learned how to heal the emotional triggers behind my eating and trust my body, everything changed. I stopped obsessing over food, the weight started coming off naturally, and I found real freedom in how I ate and lived. So I created the Sober Eating year-long mentorship to help other women experience the same transformation. So you can stop battling with food, you can lose weight without deprivation, and you can feel confident in your body again. In this mentorship, you'll have access to my proven nervous system rewiring method. You'll have access to live coaching with me, weekly accountability, and a community of women who truly understand your journey. You'll also have free access to my signature programs, the Emotional Eating Solution and Decoding Permanent Weight Loss, valued at $2,000. Click the link in the show notes to explore the mentorship today. You don't have to do this alone. I'll be right there with you every step of the way. Okay, so the difference between, relaxation and collapse, or relief and collapse, or, setting down the performance where you can just be human and collapse, that's what this is. This is like so much energy is going into my day-to-day performance, and then I have a collapse, and that collapse is this secret eating. And it's not because you're weak, right? This isn't a weakness, but it's really just because food has become the only safe place, the only area that you feel comfortable accessing that release. Because when you do it with food, you also feel like it's not just you. You also feel it's not just you. You feel like there's something else with you that's participating and that's engaging with this, right? That's engaging with this experience. And so it's not that you love eating in secret. It's just you don't know how to soothe yourself any other way, even though it feels really awful. You just this is what you know, and this is another version of solo eating. But the cost is really high because every time that you eat in hiding, it reinforces the belief that your needs and your humanity and your ability, or not ability, but your birthright to feel complex emotions is something to be ashamed of, right? It's something that can make you a failure. And so how do we reclaim solo eating? How do we reclaim it? Right? What if it doesn't have to be a secret or a spectacle? Because that's sort of what we started with, right? Beginning, it's being presented now through the internet as a spectacle. And then the other way is a secret. So what's the in between? How do we reclaim this? We reclaim it by making it a ceremony. Okay, what if solo eating became a ceremony where it's a moment of connection, where it's a moment of calm, where it's a moment where you say to yourself that you matter enough to pause. You deserve to eat slowly. You're safe to take up space at this table. He's such a big difference between secret, spectacle, and ceremony. Because you could make going out to eat at a cafe by yourself a ceremony. And if you imagine it that way, if you go in with the intention of it being that way, just think about it right now. Think about it. Think about the different emotional state you're going to go into eating a meal by yourself if you go in knowing that it's a ceremony with yourself, rather than hoping that it's going to provide for you an experience of empowerment. And imagine if you come home tired from your day, wanting to take off your mask of performance, and you choose to eat. No big deal, fine. But you don't do it from a place of secrecy or wanting it to provide you escape, but instead you do it from a place of ceremony, where it's purposeful, it's slow. You're connected to yourself. Therefore, you don't need to just black out and eat everything and then find yourself like feeling ashamed. You could intentionally engage with the eating and stop eating when you feel like you've reached a certain level of connection with yourself or you feel better. And the fact that you did engage with food, even in this time of, feeling a little bit depleted, doesn't make you wrong or bad, because the motivation that you went into this eating experience was from a place of ceremony. Can that be something that you can build? Okay, so let me give you some examples of what it could actually look like. So it could be lighting a candle before your meal. And it could be taking a couple deep breaths before your first bite. It could be asking your body, what would feel good to me right now? And then also letting your body tell you that it's done and that you don't need any more. right? Like these are like, you are the one. This is true empowerment. True empowerment, because this isn't about rules or good or bad or right or wrong. It's about reverence. It's about reverence. Because when you eat with intention like this, even if you're by yourself, your nervous system starts to learn that this is fine. This is self-love. This is safe. Right? Because food is not really the villain. Food's not really the villain. What becomes the part of us that ends up making things feel bad is usually our lack of awareness and intention around our motivations for engaging with the food. And once you do this, you could begin to build new neural pathways, new memories around food. One that isn't coded in shame. One that's not disconnected from yourself. One that doesn't come with a side of secrecy. But instead, the act of eating becomes sacred. Because the real definition of food freedom food freedom isn't about how much you eat. It's not about the substance of food itself even. It's about how honest can you be with yourself, both in public and in private. Can you eat a meal in front of others without performing? Can you eat a meal by yourself or eat a snack or engage with food from a place of emotion without hiding, without making yourself wrong, without going down a shame spiral or a binge spiral? Because this is what true healing really looks like. It's not about perfection. It's not about performance. It's about congruence. It's about this ability to be connected to yourself and trusting of yourself. Because the goal isn't just stopping emotional eating. If we think about the macro of everything we talk about on this podcast, the real goal isn't just stopping emotional eating. It's becoming someone who feels safe with food, who feels safe with their relationship with eating, and trusts the decisions they make with eating, no matter what the context, because they know, you know, that you are the one in control, regardless. Okay, so again, we want to start and continue to view our eating experiences as ceremonies, not as performances, not as right or wrong, not as punishment, but as ceremony. And that, when we do that, every contextual eating experience you have can be a good one. Okay? So that is all I have today. Thank you so much for listening. If you are watching on YouTube, please leave us a comment. Please subscribe to the channel, leave us a like. And if you are listening to us on Spotify, on Apple, make sure you give us a follow. We love watching our listeners go up. We love being able to come to you every week and just reaching more people with our message. So with that, Thank you so much. And until next time, I'm Alana, and thank you for listening to Emotional Eating Unwrapped.